Okay, wonderful. Good evening. My name is Stacy Brennan. I'm the curator of education for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. You are joining us this evening for Doing Democracy Through Creative Writing. Today's program is in honor of National Poetry Month. And this is the culmination of 3 programs that we have offered this semester in partnership with the Creative Writing Department, with the Library and Technology Services at Lehigh University, and is in conjunction with an exhibition on view at Lehigh University Art Galleries called Doing Democracy. Just a brief overview, I'll give a quick introduction and then I'll turn it over to Bob Watts, who is going to introduce the readers. And then at the end, we'll have some time for reflection. Like I said, we are going to record this program this evening and we'll place the recording on LUAG's website and we'll share it by email as well. So if you want to go back and listen to anything, you're welcome to do that or to share it out. So as I said, this has been in conjunction with Doing Democracy, which is an exhibition that features photographs that were donated to Lehigh from journalist George Stephanopoulos, and features photographs that were chosen by Lehigh University students and curated into clusters that really highlight significant events from the 20th century, from the civil rights movement and social justice movements to everyday Americans and leaders that provide inspiration to arts and culture and the things that we really enjoy. The poetry readings and various writings that have been shared have really been great in featuring themes in American democracy. So we're grateful to all of the readers who have participated in previous events, as well as that are planning to read this evening. You can view all of these photographs on our website at luag.org, in the galleries at Zollner through the end of May, and as well on the South Bethlehem Greenway through the end of August. So we hope you will take advantage of being outside and seeing the photographs there, as well as listening to student-produced videos and audio recordings. And like I said, all of that is available on our website. It's my pleasure. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Associate Professor of English, Bob Watts, who is going to lead us through this evening to introduce our speakers. So thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. And Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you especially to you and to the Lehigh University Art Galleries and to Technology Services for running or helping us put together this this series that I think has just been wonderful all year long, and I'm especially happy to end the season with this special reading in a celebration of National Poetry Month. I'll be announcing each reader, just saying your name for the most part, and so be ready to read. We're going to go roughly in alphabetical order, except for our very special guest tonight. And it's my great pleasure to introduce her. Lori Soderlin is an alum of Lehigh in both journalism and English. And so we're very proud to have one of ours back and doing so well. She's also an award-winning essayist and journalist, the author of 2 books of creative nonfiction, Chasing Montana, A Love Story, and most recently, The Change, My Great American Post-Industrial Midlife Crisis Tour, which has been named a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award in Memoir. She's also the director of the MFA program in creative writing at Manhattanville College. So, Lori, thank you so much for being here tonight, and I'd love to hear you read.
Hi, thank you so much, Bob, and hi to Stephanie, who's out there somewhere. I saw you in the screens. I'm really honored to come back to Lehigh. I love to come to Lehigh for events. I'm looking forward to a time when we can be on campus again together. I always love visiting the campus again. It's changed a lot since 1986 in good ways. I am not a poet, and this is National Poetry Month. I have a lot to say about democracy. I am drinking my coffee out of a peace mug right now. But I want to read just 5 minutes from my book. And in order to celebrate poetry, I wanted to just briefly set up my reading by saying that as a writer, as a writer of literary nonfiction, I always have a metaphor at the center of my work. Chasing Montana, a love story, is a story about unrequited love, and Chasing Montana was, like I wanted to move to Montana and I never did. It was like a thing I wanted but couldn't have. So there's always a metaphor at the center of my work. And in The Change, I'm going to read to you just a few pages. And the metaphor at the center of this book, well, I was turning 50 and I was having a midlife crisis. I was having that sense of like, is this all there is? And I was driving around the country and I was seeing a lot of towns that look like this. And in fact, there's part of the book I talk about Bethlehem when the steel mills were still kind of barely going. And I just felt like I was projecting my own feelings onto the country, which is a very large metaphor. If the country is falling apart and I feel like I'm falling apart, like, is there nothing for us but death? I mean, what is this about? And at a certain point, I had to really question why I'm so fascinated with loss. So I'm going to read the end of a chapter on Rockford, Illinois, when I have just finished touring a factory that makes screws. And I'm trying to call home to my partner at the time and tell her about it. And it rolls into another page just talking about like why am I so fascinated by loss? I wanted to read this first part just to set that up so you get a little bit of a flavor of the character in the book, and then the other part is kind of more inward looking. So without any further ado, I'll watch the time and I will try not to exceed my 5 minutes, which I've just probably used. So this is from The Change. I went to a factory. They make screws, I said on the phone to my partner. Oh, she replied. I know, it's not very interesting. No, of course it's interesting. I heard the sounds of her looking for something in a drawer. I described the screw plant, the steel wire, the potentially body-crushing spools stacked in an enormous storage room, the clanging and grinding of those oily green machines, and screw after screw after screw after screw dropping into buckets, filling in every gritty detail I could think of, until I realized I had been put on speakerphone and left on the counter of what I imagined must be an empty kitchen. I heard a dish drop in the sink and a distant uh-huh. I searched the eyes of the geeks on the bus for a moment of connection, but found my compatriots from the screw factory tour all dozing or reading the next day's itinerary. After a while, Jessica came back to the phone and I continued talking as if I had not felt her distance and had never stopped trying to reach her. It was such an interesting day, I continued. We not only saw cool, empty, ruined places, but also places with people still working in them, which caught me off guard. Oh, that's so great. Really, I'm so happy for you. She said this as if I had won an award, or better yet, as if I'd finally won a prize I had deserved since third grade, which was an accomplishment, but also kind of pathetic. These factories, Jessica, they're so interesting. Can you explain why exactly? If you were going to write it, what would you say? It was hard to say. What I saw resonated again with a need I had best expressed to Jessica in the anger and frustration of this need not being met. It was my fault in this drama that I could not find a way to tell her what I wanted. It was also wrong to believe that I wanted something any human could easily provide, like sending flowers. I needed something so hard to identify, but I somehow would know it when I saw it. Well, it's so interesting because there are these places where jobs are, and these places are interesting, I explained. Sweetie, you know what I've said about adding emphasis. It doesn't really make something more interesting? No, not really. Like lame exclamation points followed by exclamation points. Exactly, my love, exactly. I'm going to stop that part there. That's set up. So this is concrete dialogue about this need that's going unmet. And then I'll just read a page or two that kind of goes into the interior, what's behind this, what I think is underneath the metaphor of all the loss and ruin. What made all this so compelling to me? The power of human effort, the stark aesthetic beauty of abandonment, all that is unseen in the ruins of a thing. a way of really seeing that connects history directly to us. An enormous abandoned factory sitting lonely in a field was made to bustle and hum, was made to thrive. And like many others who saw such a thing and cared, I wished I could love what was lost back to life somehow. What I saw touched me and I wanted to be touched, but maybe what I meant by that was that I too wanted to be seen. The strange and storied places are not merely artifacts, they are mirrors. I circled back to the Barber Coleman factory in Rockford, Illinois, before I left Rockford, and made my cry for help, me standing before an empty, ruined building, knowing the total void inside, hoping that this building might recognize the hurt inside me. It had been this way forever between me and the world. Small towns buried in the Alleghenies, small houses in rows on the edge of Buffalo, an old farmhouse in a Wisconsin cornfield. I always looked, and what truth I saw in these places was always also a version of myself. I once imagined in distant places a kind of life I hoped for. Then I saw loneliness in them instead, and struggle. Now I had looked closer and I could see near total loss and a reckoning coming in this country if what was broken did not heal. The world I saw was as alluring to me as it had ever been, just as worthy of seeing, but also foreboding. That I was pushing Jessica away just as I confronted this hurt was frightening in the extreme. She was my best friend and a comfort, and her constant presence had kept me safe for years from a darkness I knew was out there waiting. I understood in the middle of my life that I could not wait any longer to confront it. But what was it? Depression? Disease? Where did this darkness come from? There are theories. There is a shopping list, family dysfunction, a brother who died young, the eccentricities that made me a lonely girl. There are stories in those things, but they get told and still explain very little. The grief I felt seemed rooted to a place beyond that, as if the hard parts of life simply inflamed a hurt I brought with me. Maybe the pain of abandonment is part of every human, mixed into our DNA the way plastic pollutes oceans. Disintegrated bits have entered every single cell. There is a pain that might consume any of us, a condition we are born with, and some heal it early and others heal it late, and some never do. And ask an addict why she uses drugs and she'll rationalize endlessly loneliness, stress, acne, the rain, the sun, the presence of weather. But this deeper hurt must be what moves her, what aches to be numbed. I think of addicts, not to say that this is now a story of addiction, though perhaps in the end it could be. Addiction is all around us now, an epidemic, and its cause is one of my concerns. What I want to say simply is that I know a darkness that defies pat explanation, and that such a hurt unhealed leads to harm. I have the authority to say this in part because it is so obvious. It's happening everywhere we look. We see the awful hurting every day, but seeing such a wound in ourselves is harder. What I have called longing in my own life might simply be myself begging for that darkness, that wound, to heal. And when I think of that darkness in that wound, I think of a lot of places I traveled to when I was writing this book that looked a lot like this. And that is why I wrote The Change. And thank you for listening and letting me read tonight.
Lori, thank you so much. That was just lovely. And we are very excited for the opportunity to bring you back when we can actually be together, and looking forward to that very much. We have a really interesting, really good list of poets to read tonight. A number of students here at Lehigh, former students here at Lehigh, a number of former employees of Lehigh, just community members. I'm very excited to hear everyone read. This is National Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month. As T.S. Eliot said, April is the cruelest month, and that seems appropriate for National Poetry Month. So I'm just going to, say the name of each poet, and when I say your name, if you would please read for us. Our first reader tonight is Destiny Bonilla.
All right. Hi, I will be reading a poem called Cafecito with my grandmother. A speckled white dining room table serves as the space between us. As a courtesy, it shortens when you pour el café bucelo into my cup. Just half full, Mommy has been complaining about my caffeine. Stains ring the inside of the cup like a redwood, the layers of years of use of a permanent fixture. You bought these when you first moved here, only meant to be temporary, but you love the little blue flowers on the outside, a pattern I've never seen. They are unique. They are yours. I take my coffee black, 2 sugars to sweeten. Your left hand pushes the domino sugar across the divide. Your right is palm up, pink underside, waiting for me to meet you halfway. I always do. Your coffee is lighter. A 4-second pour of half and half and 3 spoons of sugar. Our clasped hands contrast while I sip on my café. Like always, your thumb runs against my knuckles, pressing and lifting to reveal the pink print. Once I tried doing it to you. I asked, ¿Y por qué no tienes una marca también? You never answered. Mommy, hearing me interrupt the peace of our morning, pulled me aside to whisper, as if to protect your fragile heart, that it was because of your dark skin. She made me swear not to ask again and sent me to finish our morning. That was the year the table grew fast between us. Sworn to secrecy, I never mentioned how beautiful your skin is to me, how elegant and stunning you are, how much I wish I could pull a teaspoon from you to finally look like your granddaughter. Thank you.
Destiny, thank you so much. Love that. Our next poet is Sarah Boyd.
Thank you. I'll be reading a poem called Crow Dreams. 1. My body was soulless, floating over midnight air. This dream was something beyond my being, living without existing, drifting without aim or direction in the ungreedy world of my own creation. 2 crows conversed at my window. I heard their whispers, raised my eyes to theirs, and was invited to speak. I asked each crow to explain to me the nature of this reality, to show me the waking solution to ending greed. I expect the crows to know such things. I expect that they will reveal such truths to me. 2. Southern crows are sharp-tongued and wise, but tend to fly with broken wings. Every word is precise as they offer the answer to anything the mind avoids, except mine. The crows flew off at my pondering, abandoned the window pane, and disappeared under the dawn. I stopped constructing all philosophy within me, and awake now, closed the window to the crows who didn't think I was ready. 3. After the crows' rejection, I spent the day driving through the rugged cornfields of Ringgold. I parked when I saw the first scarecrow, this thing I so often see and pass unnoticed, and briefly thought of what it was to be him, mounted above the old dead corn, defenseless from the southern sun, and felt the wrinkled age of insecurity in my own skin. Does he silently observe the world and ruins around him? No scarecrow would share these secrets with me. Taking one last sorrowed glance at the lonely straw man, I lit my cigarette, merged onto Highway 27, and determined to win tonight's crow approval, left. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Another beautiful poem. Our next reader is Robb Fillman.
Thank you for inviting me to read tonight. I have 2 poems. They're both pretty short. This first one is called The Worm. My son kneels on the sidewalk, squeezing the hose's nozzle, and sprays a stream of water on a worm, mumbling, "Go, go, go," as he shushes the red wiggling tube across the hot pavement toward the green edge of grass, as he'd seen me do minutes before. It is here in this moment that my son discovers death, for he knows now that even worms have breath, that they will do anything to live. My son cries louder, "Go, go," as he bends his head to see more clearly, and I can tell that the worm is on its last leg, as if pulling the entire weight of a child as it crawls on its belly, skin scalded and torn, fleeing this hot zone like a refugee, inching forward and growing with each cool droplet from above. And this next poem I'm going to read because I know Bob likes it. This is called Superstition. And so, Bob, this is for you.
Thank you.
Don't bathe in a thunderstorm, my mother would say. Lightning can strike. I think of this as I watch from the tub, each flash a split second closer to my wife tapping on the door, jimmying the lock when she gets no answer, finding me dead, body still warm and soft against the white porcelain. But nothing ever happens, and I do not want to go. Not yet. Not while water rolls down the curves of my shoulders in beads. Not without raising my hands in prayer. Not until I can pull back the curtain, satisfied that I am clean. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Wonderful as always. Our next reader is Julia Randolph Flagg.
Hi, everyone. I'm having a bit of internet trouble, which has been the theme of this year. So I'm going to leave my video off, but this poem is called A Stroll in the Sculpture Garden. When enough voices paint their own villainous version over your twisted tale, it seems only right to oblige. They were right. It was hideous. Of course, I didn't know it would be. I found security in the temple of the goddess where I stayed as priestess and contentedly kept my purity between those pale columns. All that stone was still not impenetrable to wandering eyes drawn to glossy hair that hung heavily around shoulders, whispered to rival the goddess whose sanctuary I walked. When he sought me, infatuated with what he saw as both a thing to ruin and an act of vengeance, I knew I could do nothing against someone who was only ever taken. He had me on a whim, dragged me down into the murkiness of his own base desires and left me drowning. I rose, nauseated, on shaking limbs, slick with sweat that smelled of brine, desperate for air that didn't taste so sour. I returned to those familiar looming columns and cool, smooth floor, seeking asylum, and looked for the justice the goddess was known for. A mortal girl is so much easier to punish than a man, a god. The naive girl I was died that day. Those soft locks are now serpents, the only company I know when looking into petrified eyes that no longer see, and touching hands that hold no warmth. These stoic figures posed candidly now serve as reminders that I am the sculptor of my own fate. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That was just incredible. Very lovely. Our next reader tonight is Rayah Levy. Rayah, you here?
We can't hear you, Rayah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm coming to you from Mexico. I'm on vacation. And I wrote this poem when Barack Obama was elected. And it's called The Whole World is Watching. We watched when you didn't have a voice. We watched when we didn't have a voice of our own. We watched as knaves made up stories that tarnished our names. We watched, and there was nothing so bizarre. They made up lies and twisted truth to make traps for fools. We watched for a long time as our bodies hung from trees. We watched as men revealed the welts of scars from lashes on their backs. We watched in the 60s when we were bitten by dogs and flushed with water hose. We watched the changing of the seasons as new voices began to rise and protest our downtrodden plight. And even though all this took place, we watched while our children became complacent. We watched, neglecting to tell them the stories of our struggles. We watched and we watched as a new dawn breaks to see the changing of the guards. We watched as history took place on the epic night of November 4th, 2008. A new face, the memories of hard times past came together as tears watched our faces. We all watched in awe and marveled at what we saw. Could it be that times are changing? Could it be that times have changed? Just remember, the whole world did watch. The whole world was watching, and the whole world will continue to watch.
Thank you, Rayah, so much, and enjoy Mexico. Our next reader is Matthew Mclean.
Hello. I have two poems today. The first one was written at the very beginning of the pandemic, and the second one was written much more recently. This first one's called Carcinization. This bay is ruled by crabs. Soothed by the rolling waves of the Chesapeake, they sidestep, shuffling and click-clacking, tip-tapping from hill to river to green grass living, all while as safe from shell cracking as their bronze-tough armor belies. Science says the crab is the ideal form. It's strange but true. All creatures will evolve towards this perfect form, porcelain hard, short-sighted, soft-minded, caught with cage, as cold to touch as deathlessness allows. I feel myself changing too, as I simmer at the shores of the Chesapeake, my pulse slowing, my shell growing, and dangers, distractions, panics seem further than before. Now I'm but a crab in my pot, waiting for the water to boil. This next one is called Man in the Moon. There's an ache I know too well. It starts in my stomach and pulls its head through my chest, stretching and testing its reach. It's my least favorite friend, a conjoined twin, drinking my blood, taking enough only to linger on, buried beneath my ribs. It loves me. The ache is smooth, it is small. It is heinous and thorny. It is sleeping when I smile, it is there when I'm alone. It would hold my hand if it could. I met my ache as a child, playing alone in the yard, too small to recognize where I was, but big enough to know something was wrong, but it wasn't enough to live alone. I wonder how the man in the moon must feel, to wake every morning as the glowing earth rises past the horizon, to see every person he could ever know out of arm's reach through the swallowing black. When I am all alone, ache grows big. He slithers and constricts me, chokes me, collects my tears in a bottle. And when I finally fall asleep, ache watches the door, my loyal pet, my royal guard.
Matthew, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Our next reader is Deborah Sakarakis.
Good. Thank you. And I've been interested, inspired by the title of the series, Doing Democracy. And so I looked for some of the things that I had written that had to do either directly or loosely with that. And the first poem I'd like to read is called Tiananmen Square. It's for Hu Yaobang. And he held the top of the Communist Party from 1981 to 87. And throughout the 80s, he pursued a political and economic reforms that made him an enemy of very powerful party members who opposed free market reforms and attempts to make the government more transparent. He was blamed by many people for student disruptions and protests, and he was forced to resign as a party general secretary. A day after his death in 1989, a small-scale demonstration commemorated him and demanded that the government reassess his legacy. A week later, the day before Hu's funeral, some 100,000 students marched on Tiananmen Square, leading to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests. Following the protests, the Chinese government censored the details of Hu's life within mainland China. This is called Tiananmen Square for Hu Yaobang. There is no bloodstain or monument marking the place where students stood facing tanks and terror in 1989. Mao, however, is still memorialized this misty May Day 2007 in larger-than-life icon that floats forebodingly over the Forbidden City, the block hall of the people, not obfuscated by revisionist history, not obviated by the clacking of boots, of the changing of the guard. For me, the loud cry for democracy and freedom still echoes across the pallid plaza, still whispers, ever present on the wind, lifting colorful kites toward heaven. And this is a letter to students, Lehigh and elsewhere. Here's to all you who are not the golden boys or fair-haired girls, who are not advantaged by legacy or affluence. Do not let that deter you. Democracy, found flawed at times, is still a better system than that of royalty or caste, and you have been legislated and amended into equality. You with the brown eyes or blue, see with your intellects and your hearts. There are constraints and patterns and other lessons to be learned, like the dimension of boxes to think outside of, and the rules that can and should be broken. Be hale, be hearty, beware of things that will hurt you, but live your salad days lustfully, they will leave you. Wear black and other badges, but do not let them color your soul. Sing, dance, and have a good time. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much. That
My
was
pleasure.
wonderful. Our next reader is Jenny Gilring.
Hi, everyone. I've recently been enamored of a species of birds called chimney swifts, and they roost here in Bethlehem in chimneys in our city, and in late August, September, they fly all the way down to South America, Peru, and so I've been looking for poetry about the swifts. And there's another species of swifts actually in Europe that migrates down to Africa. And there has been a lot of poetry written about those. They're called common swifts. So I found a poem, a beautiful poem in Spanish, which I don't understand. And a friend of mine translated it. Now she's not an official, you know, this is a poor translation. Do you know what I mean? But it still made me cry. So I think it's worth reading. And I think it's these birds are such a beautiful metaphor for the irrelevance of borders when it comes down to human beings connecting with one another. And the birds are what we have in common, one of the many things. So here's the poem. This poem is by a Spanish poet. It's called The Swifts Are Back. And the poet's name is Miguel de Unamuno, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. Here we go. The swifts have returned, the ones from last year, the same ones as always, the same ones from centuries ago, the ones from next year, those that our grandparents saw flying above their foreheads, and on top of theirs, our grandchildren will also see flying black and fast. The swifts have returned, creatures of the air that do not die. Who has seen them dead? Heralds of life, faithful lovers of the long day of the golden harvest. The ones from always have returned. Immortal swifts, winged sons of strong nature, harbingers of harvests and vintages, heavenly messengers, welcome you are to our sky, you, the ones from always.
Jenny, thank you so much. That's lovely. Our next reader is Cleveland Wall.
Hi, you know, it's so perfect that I am going right after Jenny. I was thinking about you and the Swifts when I picked out this poem. Jenny has seen this poem. Um, some of you may know that she kind of spearheaded the push to save the roost at the Masonic temple, because she was in love with these birds and she saw their space was endangered. So she actually made a move and saved it, which I think is incredibly cool. So this is a poem for Jenny. Chimney Swift, a grammar. In my spare time, I'm learning the language of chimney swifts. It sounds like constant flight, and indeed, most of the morphemes are verbs expressed as a series of dips and swoops, and modified by a wild flutter of siku, siku, song of southern haunts, the steeps of Machu Picchu, which functions as adverbial phrase and or coloratura. As with Spanish, I understand a little, can read passably, but to speak this language requires wings. I study as best I can the few months they're here. The conversation is hard to follow, as native speakers are airborne all day long and roost in chimneys at night. Round the old Masonic temple, they gather at dusk and rise to a crescendo before dropping into spittle-woven nests.
Bravo. Yeah, that's fabulous.
Thank you so very much. If you haven't seen it, it is really amazing to see the Swifts. Jenny took me and my wife and son there to see them. Our next poet is Matt Wolfe.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I want to say I have seen the Doing Democracy photography on the Greenway, and it's quite lovely. Very, very wonderful. And then I looked, saw what we were supposed to, inspire us, the theme, poetry about the struggle and beauty of living in a democratic society. And that, to tell you the truth, the first thing I thought of was, geez, I don't know. I'll let you know when I live in one. That's like the first thing I thought. Like I haven't considered the United States a democracy. I haven't thought about it that way. Well, I have thought about it, but I didn't think of it as a democracy. Just to quote an article before I read my poem, it's 2013 Salon, article by Noam Chomsky, saying how in the United States, one of the main topics of academic political science is the study of attitudes and policy and their correlation. The study of attitudes is reasonably easy in the US. It's heavily polled society, pretty serious and accurate polls are there, and policy you can see and you can compare them. So in the work that's essentially the gold standard in the field, it concluded that for roughly 70% of the population, the lower 70% on the wealth income scale, they have no influence on policy whatsoever. They're effectively disenfranchised. As you move up the wealth income ladder, you get a little more influence on policy. And when you get to the top, which is maybe 1/10 of 1%, people essentially get what they want. They determine the policy. So the proper term then for that is not democracy, it's plutocracy, government by the wealthy. So considering that and considering poetry I've written, this one has to do with poem I wrote about, quote, freedom, which you can kind of link with democracy. And actually freedom, I personally consider the freedom I'll achieve would be by spiritual means, as opposed to looking for it given by man, by somebody else. Something within would be freedom, where you would get the freedom. But nonetheless, this is the poem I thought of that I thought, hey, that's a good poem to read for this. It's called You're Not Who You Say You Are. Standing on the side of the mountain, hearing calls, but you're not who you say you are. I've been hearing your claims and the way you speak to your people. I've seen the games, the way with words and images. I've seen the way you distribute your gold, the options you give, the ones you leave out. I felt the pain of your sick, heard the cries of your oppressed, and cried the tears of those who you've bombed. I see your search for oil, money, and advantage all over this globe, when the means you own already. I've seen you sell out your poor, take control of the many, and you're not who you say you are. I've heard the word freedom used for years. I've heard the word in speeches and papers and countless times out of the mouth of men waving flags and little children saluting. But what of the word do you know? Do you help provide it to your people? Do you sow? No, you're not who you say you are. How many wars must be fought until they know? How many rigged elections till it shows? How many bankrupt cries? How many promises turn to lies? How many days until your automobiles run dry and your public transportation is denied? You have many great people and done great things, but you're not who you say you are. Time to own up, come down from your gilded pedestal and relinquish your grip from our collective neck and your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, very much. Appreciate that. Thank you to all of our readers. I think it's been quite wonderful to hear you. I'm very, very glad you're all willing to do this. I'm going to, I suppose, finish the reading with two of my newer poems, part of a series that I tend to think of as letters from a father not dissimilar to me to a son not dissimilar to mine. So the first one is called That Good Man Jesus Christ. October rain has drowned the yard with color, browns, reds, golds, grass buried under leaves, sun-dried, wind-stirred. I rake them all into one pile, mountain to haul a tarp full at a time from yard to curb. But first I call you over, let you dive and swim through maple, sycamore, and elm almost as tall as you. You settle, disappear, 4 feet of boy so still you could be not there anymore. And I reach for the rake before you burst out laughing, rise like Jesus from the grave. Don't be like him, a sacrifice for someone else's sins, scapegoat too willing for the cross. You're not God's son, just mine, and I can no more raise you up than resurrect these leaves curled crisply on the grass and put them back growing and green. I want to keep you innocent, tell you people are good at heart, on moral arcs that bend slowly toward brotherhood, the kind of lie like Santa Claus or heaven parents tell to paint life better than it is, forgetting lies can kill. The dead stay dead, that much I know. That and the world is hard on everyone, but hardest on those who trust its bright facades. And then the second one is called Bedtime Story. Bedtime Story. We read The Lightning Thief. I turn out lights and leave you to cool sheets, the fan's low hum. You've never been afraid of darkness, monsters closet kept or stuffed beneath the bed, but I am terrified and don't know how much longer I can wait before I face the talk I never had to hear, not birds and bees, but cops and streets and how to live with darkness that is waiting everywhere you go, can get you killed for anything or nothing, taking steps or standing still and beautiful inside your perfect skin. Tonight, I'll let you sleep and go downstairs, sit in the TV's glow, and try to drink enough to fall in bed myself, enough that maybe I won't think of men with guns somewhere out in the night who'll see you coming and take the simple fact of you as threat. They could be anywhere. You have to watch for them to recognize the shapes they take. One night, half drunk, I'll wake you up and say, monsters are real, my love, and look like me. Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. And Stacy, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, if anyone has any questions or wanted to put anything in the chat, we welcome that at this time. I'm just going to share my screen. We have a couple of events coming up that we'd love for you to participate in. Poets for Justice Poetry Slam, which will be taking place at Steel Stacks, as well as virtually on Zoom, that is hosted by the libraries. The community conversations about race. The next event is examining community and race through the lens of poetry with the City of Philadelphia's Poet Laureate, Trapita Mason. We hope you'll join us for that. And then, of course, the Toni Morrison Book Club, Song of Solomon is our next one. We are reading all 11 of Toni Morrison's books, so we hope you will join us for that. I'm so grateful to all of our readers this evening for sharing your talent with us, for thinking about the idea of democracy and inspired by the photographs in the exhibition. And thank you so much to Bob Watts and to Stephanie Powell-Watts for organizing and coordinating with all of the readers. We are grateful to all of you for sharing with us. So did anyone have anything they wanted to say? I'll stop sharing my screen. I just wanted to make sure to get that in there before we ended this evening.
I guess I'm still unmuted. I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful opportunity to be with all of you in exceedingly trying times. So it's done my heart good, and I'm sure it's been a boon to a lot of other folks. So many thanks for keeping this series going. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you for adding that, Deborah. I
Agreed.
agree.
Agreed.
Well, it's been wonderful. If we don't have anything else, go enjoy this wonderful spring evening. We hope you will join us for future programs. And thank you all again so much. And thank you to Stephanie and Bob. And to Jasmine, who is here as well, for helping to organize all of this with the library.
Thank you for everybody that put this on, everybody that read.
Yeah,
Everybody
good to
that
see you all.
provided the audience.
Very good.
Have a great night.
Thank you.